Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's Thursday morning, so hopefully everybody had enough time to get their questions in. So let's jump in and see what we got. First up on Patreon, Mr. Morrow said, I didn't mean to make you feel like an asshole. Still happy you got to take a look at it. Mr. Morrow was referring to the fact that I had that HDMI matrix switch and forgot to test Mr. Direct Video. But listen, that's not where my ego lies. I make mistakes all the time. I always own up to them. Everybody makes mistakes. It's the people who don't own up to them are the ones that you got to watch out for, or the people that just make the same exact mistake over and over and over. But this time's definitely different. But yeah, no, it was a laugh and embarrassing at the same time. And I forgot to ask Beast about it, so I'll message him later on today and see. But I'm curious as well. But one of the other things that I'm curious about, and I may have already said this last week, but I just wanted to reiterate, it is very possible with these cheaper HDMI switches from random brands that we could buy 10 of them and 5 of them work with Mr. Direct Video and 5 of them don't, or 5 of them work with the PlayStation 3 and 5 of them don't. So while I absolutely will double check, one of the things that everybody needs to know when buying this cheap Amazon equipment, test it right away and return it if it doesn't work. Derek just had the same issue where he was trying to find DACs that used to be very easy to find. And I think he said he tested like 6 of them or something, and 3 of them didn't work. So just, while Mr. Morrow's comment was funny, I did just want to remind everybody that even if the one that I tested works right with this cheaper, random brand equipment, always test yourself immediately, meaning within the return period. And it sucks, but I mean, what's the alternative, right? HDMI matrix switches should be hundreds and hundreds of dollars, not under $200. So you could just buy a really expensive one, or you could give it 15 minutes of your time and try it out and see what happens. So I'm always trying to go with the cheaper route for the most part. But anyway, thanks for the laugh, Mr. Morrow. Next up, Steven Sanders has an absolutely critically important problem, and while I'm not an expert in this subject matter, as a happy fat guy, I feel like I have a right to respond with authority. Steven wants to know, what are my thoughts on nachos? Is it only an appetizer, or is it an actual meal? I believe nachos are a legitimate meal, though my friends always rag on me for not getting tacos. What are my thoughts? No need to be political. Choose a side, sir. Well, like most topics that people are forced to choose sides on, there is no one direct answer. If you get Taco Bell nachos with some pumped cheese on it, you're an asshole. No, I'm kidding. But that's a snack, that's an appetizer, and pumped cheese is disgusting. And those nachos aren't very good. I actually am a fan of Taco Bell, but not their nachos. However, if you go to a restaurant and you get a plate of nachos that's not massive, but big and filled with different types of proteins and cheeses and stuff like that, that could absolutely be a meal. However, if it is a giant, massive one, that's more of something to either share with people or an appetizer. So it all depends. And it's funny that you ask this, because for years I would only get at restaurants that I'd never been to before. Because, remember, in your early 20s, you're not going to restaurants. You're going to whatever bar you could afford to with the change in your pocket that day. So these weren't exactly high-end establishments. And I would always get nachos or chicken quesadillas. Because really, if you screw those up, you shouldn't be eating the food there anyway. I mean, it's a no-brainer. However, I have become kind of a connoisseur in nachos for that, and quesadillas for that reason. And I've seen some different ways of doing them both. I've seen lazy ways that turn out to be great. I've seen people get way too fancy and it just doesn't taste good at all. That's very common for quesadillas. So and my friends also would make fun of me. Like, why are you always getting nachos everywhere you go? It's like, well, because it's kind of easy to see what's on there, and we're at a shady place that probably microwaves their food anyway. So, why are you the one ordering something that you should be ordering at an actual restaurant? So yeah, I've had quite a lot of experience, and there is no one answer. It all depends on the type of nachos, how big they are, and where you order them from. So I don't know if anybody else except you and I, Steven, cares about this conversation, but it was fun to answer. So feel free to take your nacho side and come at me in the comments. Next up, Andrew Neilsley said their parents just upgraded to a newer LG OLED and they love it, except they can't connect their Wii to play Wii Fit anymore. What do I suggest for connecting a Wii to a TV with only HDMI ports? It doesn't have to be RetroTink 4K quality, but still playable for games. So this is a super easy answer. You want the Wii to HDMI from Electron Shepherd, not any of the cheap stuff you find on Amazon and AliExpress, for the same exact reason I just ranted about in the first question this week: consistency. Every time you get one from Electron Shepherd, it's going to be quality, and it's going to convert the signal from analog to digital in its original resolution, but still, it's going to be converted properly. You're not going to have some cheap ADC built in or something like that. You're not going to get one that adds 4 frames of lag and one that doesn't. It's always consistently fine. And there's a few other reasons why I suggest that one, but that is by far the main reason. And it's only $24 plus shipping. So it's like, are you really going to take a chance with something like an LG OLED that's a beautiful TV? Do you really want a chance getting like a $9 adapter and having it not work right? And it's not going to hurt your TV, but so for just playing Wii Fit, that's totally fine. I did want to elaborate a little bit on an opinion that I have. So everything I just said was total fact. This is all opinion. If you're just looking to play Wii Fit, or I occasionally like to do Wii bowling or something like that, then the leaving it in its original resolution, just make sure you set the Wii to 480p, of course, but leaving it in its original resolution is totally fine. Double check that you have it set to 480p widescreen, but it's not a bad experience. However, on an LG OLED, those are beautiful TVs. So if this was an important gaming experience to you, that's when I would seriously consider, hey, why don't I get a set of HD Retrovision component cables or original Nintendo ones, whatever, and then at least a Tink 5X or a Tink 4K. And the reason is you have this amazing TV and you're just feeding it a low resolution and relying on the TV to scale it. I mean, it's kind of like, I think the analogy I've used before, it's like buying a Lamborghini but putting $100 tires on it or something. It would work, but you're not going to get the most out of the thing that you've spent a lot of money on. So in your situation, Andrew, 100% I would just get the Wii to HDMI. And who knows, maybe that'll be a gateway drug and your parents will go, this is awesome, but I also want to play this game and that game. And, why isn't it as sharp or as colorful or whatever? So for your situation, more than good enough. You skip all the junk from Amazon and AliExpress. You don't need anything else other than an HDMI cable. But for anybody else listening, or if you or your parents decide, hey, this is actually something that makes me happy and I want to enjoy it, upgrade to at least a Tink 5X. And that way you're able to get your analog stuff digitally, but scaled and deinterlaced when that's a thing as well. So you don't have to worry about deinterlacing with Wii Fit, but you might with other Wii titles. Not a lot of really awesome 480i only games on Wii, but there are some. So yeah, that's my suggestion. Wii to HDMI, but if this is more important, or if anybody else is listening has like the same thing, I just got an OLED and I have a bunch of Rad 2Xs, there's nothing wrong with that. But you could get so much more out of your display. Whereas, I mean this with love and respect, if you're the type of person that says, I went into a big box store and bought the cheapest possible TV they had, and I think it's totally fine, I turned off all of the extra settings, it's got low latency, then yeah, just use a Rad 2X, use a direct plug and play stuff, anything that doesn't add latency or deinterlace things that aren't actually interlaced, then it's more than good enough and you're totally fine. And I would also say if you bought the $350 77-inch TV, don't buy the RetroTink 4K. Get the 5X instead, because you wouldn't really need all of that extra stuff for a cheaper TV. So hopefully that came out right. I know that was way more info than you probably wanted, Andrew, but for anybody else that's listening, I meant all of that with respect, but I also try to push my opinions on the perspective of things like that, because I've seen what happens when you put a RetroTink 4K into a cheap garbage LCD monitor like the ones I have, like I'm surrounded on, and I've also seen what happens when you put a Rad 2X into a beautiful 77-inch OLED. Looks very good, but that Tink 4K makes it look holy crap amazing. So up to you, but I just kind of wanted to share those opinions. But the Electron Shepherd adapter, that's fact. Skip the AliExpress garbage. Next, a couple questions from Belmont. I'm going to answer the easy one first. Is it okay to power the RetroTink 5X via a USB port on the monitor, or are they at risk of damaging it from not supplying enough voltage? Not supplying enough voltage can cause components to work harder, right? So it is perfectly safe. And while, yes, devices that are built badly can be damaged if you're underpowering it, Mike put protection circuitry on both of the retro tanks. I have personally plugged it into low-powered USB ports a lot and freaked out because I didn't know what the problem was. So one of my favorites was I was testing a mod. I did a beautiful job for me, not for like Cruz and Voltar, but for me, I had done a beautiful job of the installation, and I just wanted to fire it up to get a test pattern, and I plugged it into the Tank 5X, and all I got was a blue screen. I went, oh no, what did I do? And I'm messing around with it. And then I got a little bit of video and then it dropped out again. And then I realized I didn't plug it into the USB charge port. I had plugged it into some crappy USB adapter that I had running for like my HDMI splitter, that was more than enough to power that one. So all that was I had plugged it into the wrong thing. And I tell that story not only to make fun of myself, but to tell you that if you plug it into your monitor and it starts working and then blue screen's out or it doesn't work at all, you didn't break the Tank 5X. It's just not going to work being powered from that monitor. Mike did confirm this a bunch of times, but specifically when we did that podcast with Voltar about USB power and the dangers of that. So Mike confirmed, like, no, there's nothing wrong. It's got circuitry in there. I mean, maybe if you left it like that for weeks, but that at that point, that's on us. That's not on Mike. But the situation that I just described, totally fine. So there's a very long way of saying, just give it a try. And whatever, it either works or it doesn't. The next question, which is a little more complicated, what's the best ways someone could get involved with contributing to the RetroRGB website? They enjoy being a channel member, Patreon subscriber, and they bookmark their Amazon page to include my affiliate link. Thank you, Belmont. That's really nice of you. But what if someone wanted to do more? So here's why this is complicated. First, you got to figure out a way to get a hold of me because I had to obviously unpublish my email address. And while my DMs are mostly open, there was just too much crap coming through, including people who somehow think that I need to personally troubleshoot every problem in their home setup, even though I've never spoken to them before and don't know who they are. It's strange sometimes because I love helping people, but it's weird when people are like, why aren't you responding? I already messaged twice. Like, I don't know who you are. So I had to close like all my DMs everywhere, and a bunch of other BS happened too. So you have to get a hold of me. And that's, if you're a Patreon subscriber or something like that, or on any of the services, you hit me up through Discord or Patreon. But that's kind of shitty because there's a lot of really awesome people out there that aren't in the, a Patreon subscriber. So am I paywalling, trying to help RetroRGB? It's definitely not intentionally. You just need to find a way to get a hold of me. But then the content that you're looking to present has to be a fit for the site. I've had people send me, figure out how to get a hold of me or, and I said, sure, send over an example. And some of it was absolutely amazing, but it just doesn't fit on RetroRGB. So I made some suggestions on where else they could go, and they were pretty gracious. Some other people have sent some like kindergarten paint by numbers level stuff, and I was just politely like, hey, I don't think this is going to be a fit, but I appreciate you sending it. None of them took the hint, but they all were at least respectful and like, okay, so it's hard. I try to always be polite, and it's really nerve-wracking because sometimes you have situation number one where it's awesome, but I just don't, it's not a fit. And, it's always hard to let people down, even if, even if they think they're awesome at something and they're kind of not. I still don't like letting people down like that. So it's a balance, right? I got to try to figure out what works and what doesn't. And then I have to have time to set everybody up. And a perfect example of that is Marco Retro. Marco already offered to do a downscaling section on the website. All I got to do is get his account set up and walk him through it. And I just haven't had time yet, which hopefully as soon as I'm done with this, I will. So I wanted to over-explain the answer to that question because while I'm always going to end up offending somebody by accident, right? Somebody thinks they're the greatest writer in the world and, puts together a, Hooked on Phonics book and as a post, and, it's not going to read well. Those people are always going to be really mad at me because I don't feature them. Or people who have already want to feature mods that it's not stuff I normally cover. It's better fit for a wiki. Or there's a couple people that wanted me to feature mods that not only had I already covered, I actually came up with one of them, and they wanted me to cover their mod that they invented. Yeah, So it's hard. It's hard to deal with the people side of things. It's hard to deal with just my schedule. But I would love more people to jump in and contribute. And I'm just so lucky that all the people that are already contributing are just amazing people. And there's never been a problem at all with anybody's post. The biggest problem we had is like, a misspelling or somebody put the wrong picture or things that really don't matter at all. So I'm saying that only to say, like, we're just very lucky. We have an awesome crew of people. So if you wanted to contribute, Belmont, you know where to get a hold of me. That's easy. Just message and say, hey, I want to be somebody who gets to post whenever I see something cool, or I don't have time to post often, but here's one cool thing I found, cut and paste it if you want. And I could either get you an account or just, put it with credit to you. I do that all the time. But so, yeah, I mean, it was a really long way of saying, what could somebody do to get involved in contributing? Get a hold of me, get somewhat decent content, and then wait for me to be an awful person and just try to find time to make it happen. Once you kind of get into the swing of things, if you're going to be a regular contributor, it's way easier because you just write up your post, you hit submit for review, and myself or anybody else who has time would go through and just say, all right, post is good. Oh, hey, you forgot the thumbnail. I'll just, it's about a video, so I'll just use that thumbnail and move it over. And, I guess editor style, I wish somebody could edit my posts for me. Most of them are filled with grammatical errors and stuff like that. But yeah, one of us would just have to do that. And then after you've gotten into a swing of it, then and this is more for you than me, you meaning like all the contributors. I kind of just release it so you could post if you want to, but we still suggest hitting like save as draft and then letting us know, because there could be a day where there's 20 posts and the thing that you're writing is not time sensitive, so maybe it's better to wait a couple days so it doesn't get lost in the mix type of thing. Or maybe yours is super time sensitive and we have other stuff queued up for that day that isn't, so I could push that back. So I guess I just wanted to give a little bit more of a window into how things work. And I'm sure I talked way too long, and I'm sure my answers probably pissed a bunch of people off. But I always like to be transparent, because if you decide you don't like me or how I do things, that's fine. But it does really bug me when people decide that they hate me for things that just aren't even remotely close to true. So I'd rather be annoyingly honest and word vomit at you all than not. So yeah, Belmont, if you or anybody wants to help, just let me know. And if anybody else listening wants to help contribute, find a way to message me or find somebody, a mutual friend or something like that, and we'll see if we could work it out. And just another thing that I want to make very clear is that any contributors are strongly encouraged to use your own affiliate links for absolutely everything. If you don't have one and you want to use mine, cool. But that is, I try to do everything I can to promote all of the contributors themselves, to promote their work, and to use their affiliate links. And I have politely demanded that that people like My Life in Gaming, Tito, Displaced Gamers, whatever affiliate links they have, they use, even if I already have an affiliate link for the same thing, because I want RetroRGB to always be the number one focus of the community, never me. So that's kind of a big deal to me. And, that's the other reason why we're pretty strict about what goes on the site, because it could be very easy to do a post a week about a USB hub to get a bunch of Amazon affiliate link clicks on it. And while I absolutely will continue to review stuff like that, it is when it feels like it's the right fit at the right time. So when I was searching for USB 3.2 hubs and couldn't find any that worked and finally found one, that felt like the right time. But now I'm sure there's a ton more on the market that work, so there's no need for it. All right, I'll stop word vomiting. Thank you for the question, Belmont. I'm sure you didn't want a 10-minute rambly answer, but message me if you want to contribute. Next up, Demon Coup wants to talk about downscaling again. Looking at the Tink 4K documentation, it looks like the HDMI output allows for custom mode line outputs. So can you make a 240p custom output and use something like an digital to analog converter to transcode to component? So I'm 99.9% sure that you can, but I haven't personally tried it yet. I don't know why I haven't, to be honest, but I have a bunch of times downscaled 1080p to 480p and outputted that to different kind of monitors and CRTs. I've done the reverse telecine, so 1080p 24 is now 480p 72. I love all that stuff. I haven't personally gone to 240p yet, but there's no technical reason why you shouldn't be able to. I don't think 480i will work yet. I don't think that's in the cards yet. So if you need 480i output, go to the RetroTink 5X or OSSC Pro. But if you're just going to 240p, the only thing to note would be 320 by 240 is not a supported resolution of HDMI devices. But if you're going to a CRT, that doesn't matter. You would just need to use what they nicknamed super resolution and do something like 1440 by 240 or 1920 by 240, or I think there was 2550 or something like that. There was the one that the Mystery uses, I think, is compatible with a bunch of different resolutions. But point being, that horizontal resolution that you send to your CRT doesn't really matter as long as it's still a 15 kilohertz signal. So 240p output would be 15 kilohertz. So that wide resolution, you're basically just taking the same exact amount of data and stretching it out over more pixels. But since the CRT is still drawing it in the same area, it looks identical to the original. As long as it's you get something within a multiple. So that's why I said, that's why I started calling out those different ultra or super resolutions. So hopefully that all makes sense. You might want to check the RetroTink wiki. You could check maybe even with the Discord to see who else has been doing it. I just haven't covered it yet, mostly because I haven't had time, but also so far downscaling, the focus of that has been on the OSSC Pro and the RetroTink 5X. So with no disrespect to Mike, obviously, if you said, I'm looking for a really powerful downscaler, I would actually say the OSSC Pro with that add-on module or the Tink 5X are by far the best choices today. Now, eventually the Tink 4K is going to get all these features. It's just Mike's concentrating on the stuff that's most important right now. So I wouldn't have done a single thing different. So yeah, if you're looking for dedicated downscalers, check out Marco's video, check out those two devices. And there's, with the new batch of Tink 4Ks coming up, I believe Mike said it was going to be in May, you're probably going to see a bunch of Tink 5Xs hit the market as well. So if anybody needs a used 5Xs, I mean, so if anybody needs a dedicated downscaler, you can get those. Even if you had to buy a brand new one, it's still cheaper than a lot of those other solutions that we had used for years and better in most cases. So hopefully that adds things into perspective. But the very short answer to your question is I'm 99.9% sure you could do it by just making a custom mode line with a super resolution and using a DAC, and that should be it. Next up, Acnaut54 is a content creator and a streamer who wants to stream light gun games on CRTs while they're also obviously needing a way to output HDMI so it could be streamed. Their setup is SCART based, with consoles going through an RGC SCART 6-to-1 switch to either a RetroTink 5X when they're playing HDMI, or when they're playing on a CRT, they have it going through a Shiny Bow SCART to component converter. So is there an alternative solution for this without upgrading to a SCART switch with double output? Yes, for you and your setup. So I'm going to have two answers. I'm going to first answer you directly for the setup that you have, but then I'm going to go into why this might not work for other people. So why adding a SCART splitter to your setup is the right move is because you already have a good SCART switch in there. You already have a good converter, transcoder. You already have SCART cables. So in this scenario, spending $50 on a splitter, the one that you mentioned from jstechnology.com, I'll leave a link in the description, that looks perfect. I've never personally tested, but the fact that they have a picture of a scope on the page showing that they test these things and saying that it's an active switch and won't put double load on your consoles, it's probably fine. So it's always good signs that people really know what they're talking about when they already cover the questions that most people would be asking for it. So that for your setup is perfect. If you said you had some junky garbage switch and it was kind of tinting purple anyway, I would say, listen, now's the time to go to either the Games Care or the G-SCART. It's a lot of money, but here's the reason for it. But you don't have a crappy switch. You have a good one. Or on the flip side of things, if you had like one of those 3x1 component video push button switches and your entire setup was component video, that's when I would say get a G-Comp, get the Games Care, or even get a used Extron Crosspoint, spend the money on those and don't bother with a splitter. But So the point is, if you already have good equipment like you do, then just get the one component that you need. And if you ever upgrade to a different solution, that is a very handy tool to have in your toolbox. That's not something that I would say everybody needs to buy, but if you've already purchased it for a main use and then you end up upgrading later, keep it. You're going to use it again at some point for some reason. So for you, absolutely. For everybody else, just take a look at your total solution. What if you had said you have a crappy SCART switch and the cables that you had gotten were 10 years old from AliExpress? Now it's time to figure out your total setup and redo that. But you're good. Solid solution, solid setup. So perfect. And anybody else, if you're in the same scenario, the most important thing is that you want an active powered splitter on the analog side. You don't want to just use Y circuits because you can and almost certainly will kill your consoles doing it that way. But using an active buffer, either one that's built into a quality switch with multiple outputs or something like this, is a good answer. So yeah, I wanted to make sure I over-explained just so people understood the context. But Aknot, sounds like you have an awesome setup, and just throw that thing in there. And obviously just remember, you're going to need some more SCART cables. So if you use unshielded junky SCART cables, then it's gonna degrade the quality. Whereas if you use like a SCART coupler or a quality shielded SCART cable, then it's gonna look basically identical to being plugged directly into either target display. Next up, Tom wanted to follow up on the discussion from last week regarding supergun safety. And Tom said they have a decent scope and know how to use it, but what voltages are considered safe for all of the outputs? So I would strongly recommend going to the oscilloscope page on the website. I'll link to it, of course, and just running through at least the first video I did with Steve, because it'll give you a crash course on everything that you would need to know, including how to use the scope. You already know how to use it, so maybe just skim through those sections super quick. But even when we're talking about how to use the scope, Steve has some explanations as to why certain things are the way they are. So I would just kind of suffer through the whole video, even if you already know a big chunk of it, just as like a refresher course. But I'll give you a short rundown here. First and foremost, for video signals, red, green, and blue, you're going to need to make sure you have full voltage out to get a proper reading. So you're either going to want an all-white screen, color bar screen that outputs at 100% voltage, or I've seen a bunch of arcade boards have single color screens. So they don't have white, but they have red, green, and blue. And then you just test those one at a time. You definitely want to make sure that all of the video signals, including sync, are 75 ohm terminated. We go over that in the video as well. That's super important. Otherwise, you're just going to get crazy voltages and think it's too high. In that scenario as well, sync, as long as the console's powered on and running, you don't need a special test pattern for sync. As long as it's 75 ohm terminated, you're good. For video levels, you're going to want to aim for, let's just say 700 on the RGB side. I've seen as low as 600. That looks totally fine. A little higher would be nice. 750 is kind of pushing it, but that's definitely safe. Anything under a volt should be safe, but once you go over 750, you start to lose data because it starts to wash out. So from a safety perspective, you can go to almost a volt, but not from a quality perspective. From sync, you could go from, I would say 250 millivolts. You could go lower, but you might have some issues. So 250 millivolts up to about a volt. I would stay under for a volt for all of this stuff. And on the audio lines, I think it's 2.5 volts. And I did a whole other video on how to test audio voltage. But basically, if it's speaker out and not line out, then you don't want to include that unless your supergun has audio protection built in. If that's the case, I even show this in the video. Even if you turn the volume up all the way, the scope turns into one yellow line. It sounds terrible. It's awful clipping, but it never passes 2.5 volts. You get that protection. So I would definitely watch through the videos on that page, not to self-promote, because it really does answer all of your question in detail. Like my 2-minute skim through is more of a reference than anything else. So definitely check all those out, but all voltages matter. RGB, sync, and both audio channels. And you could blow out your SCART equipment if any of that is over the allotted voltage. So don't hit a volt for RGBS, and don't go over 2.5 for audio. And yeah, I'll leave a link in the description. Next up, Jason D said they noticed in their LG OLED manual it's recommended to minimize 4:3 content to reduce burn-in. Have I heard about this? Do I do anything differently? Obviously, none of us are going to stretch our retro games to 16:9, unless you're Ian, historical nerd. But so I have a bunch of opinions on this. I don't have any facts. You might want to double check different sources, ratings.com. Maybe your model OLED's different than my 2016 OLED. But here's my opinions on this. If going to 4:3 is such a big deal, then what about 235? So how many movies or documentaries, TV shows, how much content do you watch that isn't 16:9, that doesn't fill the screen top to bottom and you have little black bars on the above and below your image? Why would that be any different than 4:3 content with black bars on the side? Or is it exactly the same? It's just not as noticeable. I personally would not worry about any of that stuff. My focus would be on more general LG OLED burn-in versus how I would never worry about it on an LCD monitor. So, for example, I would have no problem syncing into a 3-hour Super Metroid session in 16:9 or in 4:3, just like I would have no problem watching a 3-hour movie. It's 235 with the black bars on the top and bottom. However, if I was going to go pause to, go eat dinner, I would either turn the TV off or I would turn a screensaver on. Even if it was like pause to go run a quick errand, and come back in 10 minutes, I still would probably turn on some sort of full 16:9 screensaver. I am still, and I could be dead wrong about this, but I still don't think it's good to constantly turn on and off your OLED TV. Like for that 10-minute go get a beer, use the bathroom and come back, I wouldn't turn the TV off and back on, but I would have a screensaver running just to make sure that all the pixels are being illuminated. So that's just my opinions on it. I don't know if anything's changed from the 26 model to the newer one. I don't know if that's actually an issue, but I do think that when I spend a lot of money on something like that, I got that at a huge discount, but it was still a lot of money for me. And I treat it with as much care as I can, but I use it. I make sure that, I enjoy using whatever it is that I paid for the exact reason that I paid for it. It'd be like buying a truck. I knew a couple of people who bought pickup trucks, but refused to put anything in the bed of it because they wanted to keep it mint. So why did you buy a truck then if you're afraid to throw your, leaf bags in the back in case it might scratch the paint? Like, it's the whole point of buying a truck is to use it as a truck. So, but that being said, if I put a bunch of pricker bushes in it, I wouldn't, I'd put something down so the prickers don't scrape the paint on the outside. So I think that's an analogy that's probably easy to visualize, and I treat all of my equipment the same way. If I bought an LG OLED, I'm going to play my favorite games on it, and I'm not going to worry about burn-in. But I'm going to make smart decisions about when I'm not gaming. Don't leave it at pause screens, change up the content, don't only use it for one thing ever type of thing. So hopefully my perspective helped a little bit, but that was all opinion. And if I'm wrong about any of it, please let me know. I'm always looking to get educated more about this stuff. Maybe there's new changes, or maybe that was just added to the manual because a couple of people only used their OLEDs for retro gaming and complained about burn-in 3 years later. Who knows? I have no clue, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I never mind being wrong. I just want to know the right thing to tell everybody. But that's, as of today, my opinion on it and where I stand. Well, that's it for this time. As always, any questions, just put them wherever it is you support in the latest Q&A post, including on YouTube. The YouTube community post thing has been weird lately, so even though I put texts, you often just see the picture there. Sorry, it's often the questions that come in are only on Patreon just because that's where the majority of subscribers are, but there's no favoritism. If you're a monthly supporter, I really appreciate you and you're eligible to answer or ask any of these questions. Just do so wherever the latest Q&A post is. Plus, I really like just kind of scrolling through in real time, like you see, hanging out as if we were hanging out together somewhere. But anyway, as always, thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week.